Hi, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm going to be making a video series on the topic of intimacy. Intimacy and relationships and sexuality, these are all very fascinating areas of life for me, partially because of the complexity of what all feeds into these topics for us and influences them and kind of guides our expression and our way through them and how we experience them and enjoy them in our lives and with other people. So these are not only topics that I've been working with professionally for the last 7 years, well, 20 years, 7 years specifically with relationships, intimacy, and sexuality, and 20 years with holistic health and transformational work and embodiment practices. And so really it's all connected and combined, and it's all like a web that feeds each other, very much like just our general health. It's an integrated system of body, mind, spirit, and there's a lot that influences every aspect of our health. And kind of like dominoes, it's like, a cascade in one area is going to produce an effect in another area. So it's really fun for me and fascinating that my life path naturally brought me into this realm of relationship. And for me, it makes so much sense with my personality type and with how I see relationships, which is that to me, relationships next to our own personal health and well-being, relationships are our greatest resources. And so I think that along with our health and well-being, relationships require and deserve a lot of effort to maintain them and to keep them healthy and balanced and feeling good. And also much like our health, which changes over time. And, regarding just health and wellness, like over time of our lives, we're constantly having to adjust how we care for and maintain our health and wellness. And relationships are similar because they're also dynamic aspects of our life. They're not just this static structure that you just kind of like get set and then just like put aside and just leave on autopilot. I mean, some people do, but if you're a person who desires to have a relationship that is fulfilling and continues to grow and transform along with you, and that you can enjoy more like a journey, then you're going to want to treat it like your health. It's an ongoing project to invest in. So let's see. So what I want to acknowledge in this video is that I'm going to be skimming over a lot of various topics in this video, and what I want to do is kind of just drop it here, drop like the basic here, and then in ongoing videos I want to unpack things a little more. There's, again, because it's part of ourselves, relationships and intimacy, it's so complex, it's so nuanced, I couldn't possibly fit it all into one video, so I'm just going to make a series. So I want to first acknowledge, well, first of all, you're going to see my eyes darting down and up. It's because I have notes down here that help to keep me on track while I'm talking. So that's what that's all about. I'm here with you, but I need to look down to come back and keep it rolling. Okay. So, while there are many men and women and couples that are drawn to my work, I want to also just acknowledge that clearly my work and I'm not for everyone. So I want to just acknowledge that when I talk about my work experience and men and women and couples and intimacy, sexuality, sensuality, relationships, when I talk about these things, it may or may not resonate with the viewer. And my hope is that for the people it does resonate for, that it offers a lot of guidance and inspiration and just ideas, and that it can be a source of positive energy. And luckily for anyone out there that my work or I don't resonate for, luckily there's something for everyone, and there's so many people that do work on these topics, and I'm more than confident that everyone will find the right person for them. So just saying all that because, I understand that the people who are drawn to work with me, and the body of information that I've received through my work, what I want to acknowledge is that I'm not suggesting that what I create and share with you is a general overall of like, so this is how it is and this is how it must go. If anything, one thing that my work has really taught me a lot about relationships and intimacy is that there's so many different kinds. There's so many different reasons why people couple up and create lifelong partnerships and create families. And there's so many different levels of intimacy that people connect on, and they're all valid. And really it comes down to, again, kind of going back to like relating relationships to health and wellness. It's not a one size fits all. It's every couple has to determine, well, first of all, every person has to determine what their needs are and what their desires are in a connection. And then every couple needs to also determine what are the needs of the relationship, and for me, the point is, as long as everyone's happy, it's good. If you're happy and you're fulfilled and you're stoked, then and you feel like it's healthy and balanced, then awesome. That's really important to bring forward because, there's just so many ways that it's done. And it's really important also not to compare, what works for some people, and then it might not work for you, So it's so important to really just honor and respect what does work for you and what does work for your relationship, and hey, if you're in the frame of mind that I'm happy and stoked on my relationship and there's always ways that it can grow and transform, it's a journey, it's always unfolding, then, that's part of the fun of relationship. You get to, it's kind of like being engaged in an ongoing art project with your partner, right? And the art project is your love, your connection, your intimacy, your journey of love together. And I love that so much. And I get really inspired by the topic in general, and especially by working with people and having people basically expose this very personal, often private part of their life to me, and getting to, almost view it as a puzzle of like, okay, like where are things feeling really balanced and strong and healthy? And okay, where are things feeling like could use a little bit more support? And so that's fun for me. And I'm so just delighted and honored when my work helps bring people closer together, which it does. And it's very fulfilling for me. Okay, moving on. So I'm going to start by sharing that the majority of women that come to me for my work, these are women that are really wanting to feel a greater sense of confidence in many areas of themselves and in their partnerships. So first of all, there's verbal communication. There's just all ways that a woman expresses herself that she's wanting to feel more confident in, more confidence and connection to her body, and expressing not only through her words, but through her body. And then that translates over into how she expresses herself sensually and sexually with her partner. And so women tend to be drawn to me and my work to help create a really safe, secure space for them to explore and experiment and really discover their own unique, in a sense, signature to like what is their expression and what feels good to them, and what really works for them, and then what doesn't work so much, and what is that, and what does it need to balance or refine or develop or maybe heal and transform. That's the beauty of relationships and intimacy. It's a very strong mirror for ways that we can heal and transform if we want to. So verbal confidence has a lot to do with the awareness and skill set around having a vocabulary that accurately expresses what's going on inside. I remember what it used to feel like for me personally, in my childhood and in my young adult years. I remember what it felt like to not have the vocabulary to describe this very complex inner landscape that I was navigating inside, and then, using these words to communicate about it to whoever I'm in a relationship with, whether it's like a boyfriend or even just like family or friends. It's like, it's interesting and like even slightly comical to me how the nature of language is in itself, it's somewhat cryptic. We have to use these words, these very specific words with very specific definitions to describe these incredibly complex and nuanced experiences that we're having psychologically inside of ourselves, and how when a person feels like they have the vocabulary to express that, it at least gives them a lot more feeling of self-confidence to do so, or at least try, because this is an area that, if we can't express ourselves on that level first, most likely we're going to have a difficulty in expressing ourselves sensually and sexually with our partner. So one of the areas that I really help women is learning a vocabulary that can take all of these complexities and nuances and to bring them out in a way that is effective, meaning it's most accurately describing what's going on with us, and also it's being said in a way that is able to be received by the other in a way that feels soft and warm and inviting and respectful and kind and loving and collaborative, even if what's coming forward is insanely vulnerable. None of us want to hurt the people we love. It's a really hard position to be in, to feel like, oh man, I have this truth inside of me, I have this need, I have this desire, but gosh, if I speak this to my partner, it's going to hurt that person's feelings. And like, for most people, that's not a good feeling to feel like that, And then at the same time, if we're in a relationship that, acknowledges the value of growth and healing and transformation, and acknowledges that in order to achieve true intimacy, vulnerability is essential. You're not getting into the realm of intimacy if you cannot be vulnerable. And, so if you're a person and if the partnership is one that values like true intimacy and depth, then vulnerability really has to be worked with. And it's about, how do I do this in a way that at least softens the edges and helps the person receiving it to understand, hey, I'm here with you, I love you, I want this with you, I want the best for us, and I've got some things to communicate, and I'm scared that it's not going to land right, and I'm scared I'm going to hurt you. And, it's like how to really include all these pieces when we're approaching, one of these very delicate kind of moments that most of us, if you've ever been in a relationship, you've had one of these moments, right? At least once, right? All the time. So anyways, yeah. And I'm starting with this piece of verbal communication because it's so important. It's so important. Well, first of all, speaking of the creative process, it's like we have our thoughts and our feelings. So that's what starts it inside of us, right? We get inspired by some kind of thought or feeling, and that's happening inside. And those do have kind of magnetizing energies that they have within them. Most often we're gonna create with thoughts and feelings by putting words and actions to it. So if we want something to happen, we're oftentimes going to need to speak some words and do some things, right? So I'm starting with verbal communication because it's one of the most subtle layers, but it's, in my opinion, the most important layer. I can't even tell you how many times I've been in a session with a client and they're complaining about things with their partner, and I'm like, well, what does he say when you tell him about this? And their response is like, oh no, we don't talk about this stuff. And it's like, well, it's a pretty good place to start. You can't expect things to just naturally change without talking about it, especially so again, I'm going to speak. So I work mostly with men, women, and couples, and the couples that I work with are heterosexual couples. So I want to just make it known that I'm not speaking for the whole of humanity when I'm talking about any of this stuff, but I'm talking about my work experience and my life experience and the clients that are drawn to me. So in my experience, there's a typical dynamic that happens between men and women. All the time. And it's one, if I were just to sum it up, it's that women would like some things to be different, but they don't want to talk about it. They would just like their man to just know and just do the thing. And that's an area where women, we really don't do ourselves a favor. We don't do anyone a favor, actually, in that position, because that's just not how that works. Men, in fact, in my experience of working with couples, what I've seen, and in just working with men in general, what I've seen is that actually the men desire so much to be able to show up and give to his woman and serve her in all the ways she wants and needs. Like, they want so much to make her happy. But men, they're not mind readers, and they don't come with an instruction manual. We women certainly don't. And they really do need to be told and guided. And they need the telling and the guidance to happen in a way that they can receive. They need it to feel encouraging and acknowledging and warm and inviting and loving and kind. Oftentimes, a woman's communication, when she wants something to be done differently, oftentimes a man can receive it in a way, it can come out in a certain way that feels judgmental or critical or kind of condescending in some way, and that's not helpful to the man. That's gonna not only make him feel insecure, but it's gonna shut him down. And so as women, it's really important, and men too. I mean, we all need to do this. It's so important to actually communicate about the things that you want to experience or enjoy, or ways that you want to grow in the relationship, or just to establish a really healthy ground of clear, honest, vulnerable communication, ideally at the onset of the relationship. I have a lot of couples that I work with that one of the common threads is that they've entered into some very big agreements with each other without having some really important conversations first around, like, what does this look like, and how does this go? Like, how do you foresee this? How do I foresee this? Like, what do we do if, just like having certain conversations in place before, taking on some of the biggest commitments a person could make in their life is a really good idea. But really just communication about any area of life and relationship that is helpful. So I'm going to repeat here as well. Thank you so much for everyone that's here. Hi. I'm going to repeat that in this video, I'm going to be doing a light skim of a number of different topics. And then in subsequent videos, I'm going to be unpacking these different topics more. Okay, moving on. Yeah. So again, one of the reasons why I'm starting with verbal communication is because it's subtle, but it's so complex and can be complicated. I mean, if you just take like one moment of our human experience, in one moment of experience, we can have a flood of all kinds of different thoughts and feelings going off inside of us. And so often those thoughts and feelings can even be contradicting each other. And the way that our minds work, we want to like categorize and compartmentalize, and we want to like kind of put little boxes in things and, you know, make sense of things. But so often where we limit ourselves and kind of create some problems is where we think to ourselves in this way, like as if our experience is like, it's this or that. I'm thinking this or that, or I have to feel this or that. And the complexity is that it's so rarely this or that scenario. In so many cases, it's that and that. And that's where it gets complicated, because a lot of times the that and that are actually conflicting feelings about something, right? And it's for our minds, how to like stretch our minds in a way to where we can actually hold all of the variations, all of the complexities and the nuances of our experience in one sphere altogether, and really acknowledge like the complexity of the human experience of like, yeah, I feel this way and I feel this way. So that in itself is so powerful to like kind of open up and tap into just the greater reality of like what we are, this fascinating human organism. At least it's fascinating to me. I love thinking about this stuff. Okay, so yeah, so women often come to me to learn a greater vocabulary to help communicate and express what they're thinking and what they're feeling, and especially what they're needing. And it gets really vulnerable even when it goes into like what she desires. You know, the topics of needs and desires are very sensitive for a lot of people. You know, a lot of people, men and women, have their own types of conditioning that have told them in one way or another that they don't deserve to have needs and desires, and they don't deserve to be heard, let alone met, right? There's, you know, yeah, there's so much that goes into that. And luckily we're in a time period where we have so much progression and experimentation and healing and transformation within the realm of human relationships and intimacy and sexuality. I mean, really for the first time in all of our recorded history. I mean, it's really the women's movement wasn't that like... Well, I think in the 20s is when birth control was invented, and that was like a huge opening for like women's empowerment and women's sexuality for the first time in all of our recorded history. And since then, just, you know, the opening of women's rights. But before then, you know, collectively humans have been very stunted in this part of themselves. And I mean, you go back like romantic love, marriage for romantic love is still a very new relational phenomenon in our human experience. I mean, all of our recorded history up until just like, I think it's like 300 years ago, something like that. All of our recorded history before that, marriage was not about romance. It was not about love. It was not about attraction and chemistry. Nothing about that, you know? So it's really important, I think, for us, you know, we are alive at this day and age where there's so much progression and evolution on these topics. And it's important to realize in the moments where maybe we're being clumsy, maybe we're, clumsy. Maybe we're making a mess of the situation, right? It's important to realize and kind of give ourselves a break and soften our own edges of like, look, we're not acting through a model of relationship that goes back thousands of years. In fact, we are writing how the model works right now, like all of us right now, the way that we do relationships. So I think it's important to remember that. And, you know, that in these types of experimental times, things are going to be clumsy and messy. We are traversing territory that has never been done before. You know, it was like our grandmothers didn't walk the path. And for most of us I'm 40, and for most of us, like in this generation, you know, like our mothers didn't even walk the path. Like, we're kind of stepping up to this whole new landscape of relationship and dynamics between men and women and figuring it out. So it's important to just remember that and be gentle with ourselves, be gentle with other people, because we're all, I think, at the core of our hearts, I think we're wanting the same thing, to feel loved and connected and intimate and feel safe and secure and stable in our connections and in our community and in our life. You know, that's a very important basic human need. Okay, moving on. So going to the topic of how I help, mostly women are drawn to this work. I think men are definitely drawn to it too, but it tends to be where women kind of, for the most part, lead the way in the area of their relationship that has to do with like constantly growing and evolving and expanding and learning and, you know, transforming. It's like, in my work experience, what I've seen is that it's most often the woman that's like, I want to do this thing differently. I want more out of this part of our connection, you know? And so, you know, speaking of communication, one area that I really help women is to specifically learn how to communicate around the really delicate, vulnerable topics, the topics where, you know, like I mentioned previously, you know, when we have needs and desires, when we have a truth that we feel needs to be spoken, and we're scared because that truth of our needs and desires are likely going to upset or disturb or, you know, disappoint the person that we love. And that's such a hard feeling. That's such a hard position to be in. And at the same time, you know, and so what's a person to do, right? Do you not say anything and just like shut yourself off to that part of yourself? Do you say the thing and then, you know, be open to the repercussions of how it might go, you know? And like, do you say the thing and then like, I think the greatest fear is being rejected by the other person in some way, right? The other person getting upset and feeling disappointed and then rejecting us, right? It's like, that's like the biggest fear. And so it's like how to have these conversations that can really, as best a person can, accurately express what's all going on in here in a way that can be actually like, that can land softly for the other person. And so there's certain vocabulary skills, but there's also certain ways where communications, like the container of the communication, can be set. You know, things like make a plan, make a special plan, a special day and time where you both are going to set aside to talk about the thing. Excuse me, my drink is over there. And yeah, rather than, you know, springing it on the other person, like while she's making dinner or, you know, while he's, you know, doing computer work or whatever. It's like setting a time aside, like, hey, I really want to talk. I'd like to talk about, you know, there's just some stuff coming up for me right now, and I just feel like I want a sacred space with you to just sit and focus. And if we can just create a container, like, I'm just moving through a process right now and I want to share it with you and I want to get your feedback and I just want to know, I just need to get this out and maybe like hopefully it'll help us grow, you know, something to that effect. And that way you're both coming to the container with an awareness and can be in the right frame of mind. And then things like, acknowledge that there's topics that you want to discuss and you're feeling vulnerable, you're feeling scared, you're feeling maybe like, gosh, I've never really talked about this part of myself with anyone before and I'm feeling nervous. I feel like, please, I want to ask for your patience and, your permission that it's okay for me not to be perfect in this moment. It's okay that, like, if I say something and if it doesn't come out right, like, I want to ask your permission that, like, can I have a couple tries to get it right and to, like, make sure that the words I say are actually incongruent with how I think and feel. How often do we do that? How often do we say the thing and then later we're like, ooh, that actually wasn't quite what I wanted to say. That's what came out, but, can I please have a do-over? We need to give each other that grace when we're in a relationship because we're not here to be perfect. We're human. It's like learn as you go. And, there's no real guidebook necessarily, except for like, coaches like, me and just so many others out there that can create some guidance along the way. But I mean, point being, like, it's not really built into the culture, right? How to communicate about these really delicate topics. So I find that, like, sometimes just even putting out there, like, can I please have your permission to be messy? Can I please have your permission? Like, is it okay? Like, I want to be able to just like talk and just cry and let myself cry. Like, I feel like I need to move this energy. And, can I have your patience in understanding that maybe we're not going to come to a point of resolve in this conversation, maybe this is a part of a process, a conversation process over, I don't know, like several days even, several weeks sometimes to like get really clear on like, okay, what is the thing and what does it need? Right? It's a process, and so like coming forward with these, setting these in place at the start and this gives you as the person who's, creating the space, it gives you the permission to just be a human and, to be messy and, to try your best and to learn in real time, right? And it gives the other person, it gives them a sense of like, they get to be here for you and hold the space for you as long as the communication can, stay in a loving, kind, respectful tone that feels inviting and collaborative, that feels clear without being like blaming and judging and guilting, right? It gives the other person to hold a space for you as a person coming forward. It's like, wow, like, most people actually, by being invited to hold that space for you, what it also does for them is it gives them permission to do the same for, in the future when they're the ones needing to share the vulnerable thing that they don't really want to talk about, but kind of need to, So yeah, these are just some points that I've found work really well with the couples that I work with and even the single people that I work with, and in my own life, it's been really helpful. So that is one really important piece. Okay, so again, all of the couples that I worked with have been heterosexual couples. I think some of this transfers over to same-sex couples too, because I think some of the stuff that I'm talking about, I don't think it really matters what gender or sexual orientation a person is. I think some of this is just human. Some of this is just part of being human and being on this wild human journey we're all on. But the women that come to work with me, most often they're wanting to feel a greater sense of confidence in their verbal expression, in connection to their bodies, and in their sensual and sexual connection as well. And so oftentimes it's the woman coming forward and wanting to develop more of herself in this way and wanting to experience more of that in her relationship. Actually, in my email newsletter this month, I did one page all about like a quick guide on how to create a sensual experience with your partner. And so I definitely look forward on expanding more on that topic in a later video. But, it's like, some couples that I work with are newer couples and they still have the spark of passion and chemistry in their connection. But they're also recognizing where each one is a little limited in how they express it and how they share it. So those are some of the couples that I work with. I would say most of the couples I work with are longer term couples, married couples, or couples that are in long-term life partnership, domestic couples, couples with families. And so a lot of it is like women and men that feel like the spark is lost and how do we get it back? And so I'm going to share now a little bit about that. So my work experience of the last 7 years, I've been working with singles and couples. I've worked across a handful of states and a few countries in Asia. I've worked with people ages 19 to 86. And part of what's really interesting for me is it's almost as if through my work experience, it's almost as if I've been witnessing this ongoing conversation between men and women in relationship. And it's almost like, it's like this meta conversation that it's like these common threads that like across, countries and states and ages and backgrounds, it's like there's these common threads across all of it. And it's like I'm like sitting back here, I'm just like witnessing in a sense like this conversation being had. And so it's like I know so much about her position, and I know so much about his position. Like I've witnessed so much, and I can see the points of view of both. And I can see also the blind spots of both. I can see the areas of where there's the blind spots and why they're not fully understanding the other, and where the wires get crossed, and where, the misunderstandings, miscommunications, misinterpretations, like all these things just kind of snowball into creating this whole situation of disconnection, basically a lower quality of connection than what they really want to feel, or maybe what they once felt and want to feel again, right? So it's really fascinating. And my goal with my work is to help illuminate for each side more about what's going on for them, to help each side understand more about their own experience, because that's sometimes what's tricky too, right? Again, we're having these human experiences that are insanely complex, and sometimes it's really hard even understanding just what's going on for us, letting alone like fully understanding what's going on for the other person, and then using these words to communicate about it. And everybody has a different supply of vocabulary, to accurately express themselves. So often I think the pain that comes into relationships, and even, is really influences the ending of relationships. It comes because the communication is not quite on point to describe what's actually going on. The awareness of what's actually going on, and how to sift through all the complexity, and like how to hold the space for that multifaceted moment of human experience, right? And then how to like condense it all down into words to speak to this other person. It's a skill. It needs to be learned. It's a learned behavior. And my hope in my work is to help people understand more about what's going on for themselves, and learn a vocabulary that can express that. And then from that point, also kind of expand their point of view to understand more about what's going on for the other person. So often part of the pain of relationships and intimacy that's not being met is like, people actually want to meet each other's needs. It's like when you're in a relationship with someone and you love them, like everybody like really genuinely wants to meet their needs and for their needs to be met. And it's really hard to do if you can't understand what's going on with you and then put words to it and then hold space for the other person figuring out what's going on for them and then to put words for it, and then, you know, the space in between you where all the words interact, right? And all the energy interacts, right? And it creates pain because the desire at the core is to experience that love and to experience that connection and that depth and that intimacy, that safety and that security with each other, right? And then it's painful. It's so painful when that can't be accomplished because the words and the expression creates a disconnect. You know, okay, I'm going to break down the meta conversation that I mentioned. And, okay, I'm going to have to do just a real, again, this is going to be like a skimming the top because I just have 20 minutes left on this call. This is going to be a skimming the top, and then I'm going to unpack this all more in future videos. Okay, so here's the meta conversation and the general bits of how this tends to go with the couples that I work with anyways. Okay. Her experience is that her needs aren't being met, and they haven't been met in quite a while. And the main needs are emotionally and logistically. Again, a lot of the couples that I work with are domestic partnerships, or they're couples that have families where there's a much greater need for logistical intimacy, I guess, logistical, like systems and efficacy of how the logistics get managed between the couple. It's a very, very important part of being a domestic partnership of any kind. And, you know, there's parts of that where that really can fuel a relationship, and it can bring people together and make them feel like, wow, we are a really good team. Like, when you do your part and I do my part and we bring it together, like it just works and we handle it and we're there for each other. And it's such a good feeling. And at the same time, when there's a lot of logistics to constantly be hashing out, the logistics are not necessarily like the sexiest part of the connection. It requires a lot of time. It requires a lot of time and attention to get all the logistics supported and feeling good and, you know, feeling healthy and balanced and energized. But again, it's not necessarily the quality of the connection that like makes people want to like jump into the bedroom together. You know, it oftentimes ends up being kind of, you know, can be kind of a drain, you know, that's okay. You know, it's all about how people do it together. But, so anyways, like her needs of emotional and the emotional intimacy and the logistics haven't been met in a long time. And then eventually, and then like if she has some kind of inability to effectively communicate, she might communicate, might not be effective. You know, oftentimes when women communicate, it can be in a way that's you know, that sounds critical or judgmental or harsh or, you know, condescending or, you know, in a way that's hard for a man to receive. Or maybe she doesn't really have the vocabulary to communicate what her needs are. So maybe she doesn't even really try to communicate. Maybe she's tried to communicate so many times and she just feels defeated because she feels like, it's not being received, it's not being picked up, it's not being, you know, noticed and tended to by the partner. So over time, what happens is that when a woman feels these areas of herself and her life aren't being met, it's a tendency for her to start shutting down in her availability to her partner, sensually and sexually. And it's totally understandable. I mean, it's like, especially like women with children, it's like, you know, a lot of women also are working and they're also, you know, doing so much to manage the home. And it's so much managing that by the end of the day, like so many women don't also have the energy to like, you know, just like kind of whip around and like be like the most amazing, you know, sexual goddess that like she's capable of embodying and like, you know, get in the bedroom and like get going, you know. It's like just, it doesn't quite work that way because we all have a finite amount of time and energy every day. And so, you know, eventually a woman over time, she just starts shutting down to her availability to her partner sensually and sexually. You know, oftentimes women are feeling really stressed and tired and they're feeling unmet. And, you know, it's women oftentimes, when it comes to sex, are very context dependent. So many women I work with, oh my gosh, a common thread there is it's very hard for a woman to be present when she's experiencing the receiving of pleasure that her partner is giving her. It's like there hasn't been enough of a bridge in a sense to go from like the normal daily grind into sexy time in the bedroom. And since there's not really been a bridge and it's just like there's just kind of no transition point, it's like so often, and I mean I've experienced this and so many women have, so often like in her moment of actually receiving, she's in her head about, oh, and I gotta go grocery shopping, and oh, did I pay that bill? And I didn't get to that other piece, and like, oh, I'm feeling behind, and I'm feeling kind of nervous, like, oh, like I gotta get dinner going, and I hope this, you know, he's already been doing this for a while, like how much longer are we gonna do? You know, it's like, you know, is he liking this? Oh, now I feel bad that he's just like putting so much time into this, and now I'm in my head about that. You know, like women like get into their head, and it just gets like on this spin cycle that disconnects them from their own body and their pleasure, and from receiving pleasure from, you know, the efforts that their partner is giving to them to make them happy and make them feel good. So that's one area that I really guide a lot of my women clients and my couples of like, create that bridge. Create that bridge. It's so important. And men don't have the same kind of complexity around like context when it comes to their own sexual arousal and desire and availability. It just works differently, you know? And I think like biologically, it makes sense. Biologically, we are wired, women, we are wired to be tuned into the entire field of experience, right? Because we're the ones that carry the baby and give birth to the baby, and the baby is mostly dependent upon like the mom for its life for the first couple of years, if not 3 years, you know. And so, and as the mother, you know, we are biologically wired in our brain to tune into sounds and tones and body movement, and, you know, of like we're taking in sensual input from the entire field of experience, and we are tuning into like basically where's their harmony and where's their disharmony, and like, you know, if there's disharmony, like I need to tend to that. So women, just the way that we're tuned in, we need actually more of a bridge to go from the daily grind to, you know, sexy time in the bedroom. That's very common. And so in his experience, it's really common on his end. He's often unaware of why the spark went out. He's often unaware of when it happened, can come back. He's often unaware of his contribution to her needs not getting met. And again, let me back it up and just say, for what I'm sharing here on both sides, this doesn't mean that anyone's at fault. It doesn't mean that anyone's not trying, that anyone, it's not about that at all. Like, all of this is just natural kind of dynamics that tend to come up, at least in the couples that I work with, and so I'm sharing this with you because maybe there's some people out there that can relate to this, that have been in relationships like this or are in a relationship like this. And if that's not you, then great. And I hope it's like, ideally, like, the goal is harmony, right? And fulfillment and a sense of peace and security and stability and just all the good things. But relationships just don't always go that way, right? And it's a learning experience. So that's why I'm sharing all this. He is often unaware that she has needs that aren't being met. He feels often too insecure and vulnerable to acknowledge his contribution to where the needs aren't being met, especially when it comes to the topic of anything in the bedroom. Like, it's hard for a man to, really receive that information and to, like, humble himself to, learning more, understanding more, and oftentimes the reason why the men doesn't really understand is because the woman hasn't really told him, again, like, men do really well with very specific, direct, clear, loving, encouraging, kind guidance, and oftentimes, going back to, like, this connects really, it's all connected. Like I said, it's like, it's all like a web. So this goes back to a woman, like, a lot of times, and again, I've been there myself too. I still find myself there in some moments where sometimes it's really hard to understand what's all going on in here and then how to put words to all of it and give it to the other person in a way that they can receive and it feels soft, and where they can, like, oh yeah, I really see that, I get that, and, like, okay, yeah, how do I help, and, like, what more can I do, or, like, what do you need, like, do you need me to just listen, do you need me to be, like, actively solving this with you, so a lot of times, just that in itself, a woman's own awareness of her psychological landscape, right? So often women are not aware of their sexual landscape either. It's so rare, so rare that I work with anyone. But I'll just keep it to women right now. It's so rare that I work with a woman who's had an experience where someone has just basically said, you know what? I want you to just lay down. I want you to just open yourself to me, and all I want to do is just give to you, and I want it to feel good. I want to build, I want it to even feel like pleasurable, sensual. I want it to be sexually pleasurable. I'm just going to take you on a journey, and it's a journey where the only destination, the only goal in this journey is that you're enjoying it, that you feel pleasure from it. And, so few women have ever had an experience remotely like that. So, the sensual, sexual landscape of a woman, talk about nuance. It's so nuanced, and it's very different from one woman to another. Everybody's different. So every new relationship we get into, we're exploring this new terrain, and it's so much more helpful when the person that we're exploring with can actually give us some tips of, like, right here, just like that, just like this, and this is how I like it, and this is, like, it's so helpful, right? And to get that guidance that you feel like you're not, like, just shooting in the dark, like, oh God, I hope this works. Okay, gosh, I'm realizing I need to wrap this up. I'm not going to get as far as I wanted to in this video, but I didn't expect to complete it because I knew it was a lot of information, and I knew I'd be creating a series of videos around these topics. Okay. What I'm going to do is just, like, again, skim. So it's like, okay, there's her side, there's his side. Okay, now what to do about it, right? I'm going to just nutshell the guidance. What she needs is to feel more understood about what her needs are and the ways that he can be supportive to them, specifically, logistically, and emotionally, to first start there. What he needs, regular sharing of physical affection of any kind, that confirms to him that he is desired by her, which confirms to him that she loves him and is happy with him and that he's doing it right. Okay. Along with developing the verbal communication piece, what she can get to start is really acknowledging all of the ways that he shows up to give to her. Even if it's not always like perfect and exactly on point, just acknowledging the effort. Like, hey, I see that you did this and I know that you did it to make me feel good and to make me happy. Thank you so much. Just that acknowledgement means the world to him. And, and then what he could get to start, thinking of ways to help her clear her plate every day, to basically give her more time and energy where she can take care of herself, she can go enjoy time with friends and family, she can basically fill her own well so that she actually has energy to enjoy with him. And then when it comes to physical affection, what he can do is, like, I would say, I suggest my clients, gotta wrap this up. I suggest my clients, especially the men to the women, I'm like, look, you can't expect just to take up a few more chores every week and then that means you get like a free entrance like into her body sexually. It's like you got to back that up and you need to like kind of start with the tending to the emotional intimacy and the logistics and to her safety and security, and start with physical intimacy that's like affectionate and loving, like petting and massaging and snuggling and holding hands. And there's so many ways to share affection with someone that's not directly sexual. Most women, by the time like they're cut off sexually, and if it's been years, there's a lot of sexless marriages out there like that go for years, no sex. If that's the case, the man's gonna have to like really back that up and tend to the more like outer petals of the intimacy flower, you know what I mean? And just give time to like really hanging out in that space for a while. Okay, I gotta wrap it up. I'm going to go into more of all of this in future soon videos. Thank you so much again for joining me here. If you like my content, please feel free to visit my website. I have lots of blogs on all these kinds of topics, and I have my coaching services are available on my website. And if you're interested in any of those, you're welcome to join me on a free 30-minute call. We can just kind of open up what you're working with and, get a feel for each other if we're a good fit. If you would like to receive my monthly newsletter that goes into holistic wellness, transformational work, feminine embodiment, relationships and intimacy, then please enter your email at the bottom of any of my website pages, goddessmodern.com, or you can DM me your email and I'll plug it in for you. Please do not put your email in the comments because your email is a precious resource. You don't want to just blast that out for everyone to see in the comment section, but you're welcome to DM me and I can plug it in for you if going to my website is something you just don't want to do for some reason. But please visit. I put a lot of work into it and creating content there that I think would be helpful for you. Okay, thank you so much. Bye.